On our broadcast tonight, the bully pulpit, the president weighs in on that arrest of a black Harvard professor in his own home. So does the cop who made the arrest. A crackdown on corruption and unbelievable roundup today by the feds. Growth industry, there's been a breakthrough in cloning research. What does it mean for humans? And life lessons, putting summer to work for kids, a big idea that's catching on and making a difference in a lot of young lives. Also tonight, is your state on the list of best places to do business? Nightly News begins now.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
Good evening. It came at the end of a press conference almost entirely about health care. A reporter asked President Obama about the arrest of a man he knows, a distinguished professor at Harvard, who was trying to enter his own home and was then mistaken for a burglar. Police were called, tempers flared, and Professor Henry Louis Gates Jr. ended up in handcuffs and spent a few hours in the slammer before charges were dropped. Complicating things, we learned tonight there apparently had been a previous break-in while the professor had been away on a trip. The president last night said the police there acted stupidly. The police begged to differ, and we begin tonight with NBC's Ron Allen.
The arrest of Henry Louis Gates seemed to touch a nerve with President Obama. While admitting he did not have all the facts about what happened when the Harvard scholar was arrested at his home for disorderly conduct, the president strongly criticized the Cambridge police.
I think it's fair to say, number one, any of us would be pretty angry. Number two, that the Cambridge police acted stupidly in arresting somebody when there was already proof that they were in their own home.
I could not believe my ears this morning when I heard Obama make that statement.
That choice of words has ignited a strong emotional response. The arresting officer, Sergeant James Crowley, told the local Fox TV station he is not a racist.
Mr. Gates has asked him for an apology. What is your reaction to that?
There will be no apology. Is this now and ever no apology? Yes.
Colleagues say Crowley is an expert who teaches cadets how to avoid racial profiling. Crowley's department today defended his actions.
I do not believe his actions in any way were racially motivated.
It's over. Turning to his vacation home, Gates refused to answer questions today. But last night on CNN, he vowed to keep speaking out.
Because if this can happen to me in Harvard Square, this can happen to anybody in the United States, and I'm determined that it never happened to anybody again.
While the two main players in the case are giving conflicting accounts of what happened, the debate swirls around them. Was this arrest justified, or was it racial profiling? And should the President of the United States be commenting at all? White House Press Secretary Robert Gibbs told reporters on Air Force One today, "I think there's a point in this where it becomes clear that the situation as it was originally called in is not the current situation. At that point, cooler heads likely should have prevailed on both sides." But some say the president went too far.
It was stupid to have been arrested in that situation, for Professor Gates to have been arrested, but I think the president could have stopped short at labeling the entire police department as stupid.
Others, convinced the Gates case is an example of racial profiling, applauded the president for addressing the issue.
I'm sure he thought about it, and I accept it. I may have said something worse. It is not an issue that is void of emotion.
While both Gates and Crowley refuse to apologize, the spokesman insists the president has no regrets about what he said. Ron Allen, NBC News, New York.
And all of this brings us to our chief White House correspondent and political director, Chuck Todd. Chuck, to distill this, did you get the sense there today that the White House would like any of this back today?
Well, privately, you talk to some aides, and they do wish the word stupidity could be taken back. But the president today, in an interview that'll air later, seemed to stand by his critique. Take a listen.
Much sense. I think that it doesn't make sense, with all the problems that we have out there, to arrest a guy in his own home if he's not causing a serious disturbance.
Now, of course, the frustrating thing for the White House is all of this as you brought up at the beginning of the broadcast, Brian, is stepping on their push for health care. Today was supposed to be the 11th straight day that the president used a public forum to push health care. And in fact, he actually was dealt a setback. He was in Cleveland at a town hall meeting, and he admitted that Senator Reid, the Senate Majority Leader, was not going to get a bill out of the Senate by the August recess, that they were going to have to take more time. He accepted that as fact. His chief of staff, by the way, spent all day on Capitol Hill still trying to convince the House to get a health care bill out by the August recess. They don't want to be dealt a double setback in both the Senate and the House. So it's a distraction on a day where they had a lot of behind-the-scenes work to do, Brian.
Chuck Todd on a rainy night at the White House, and so it goes in Washington. Chuck, thanks. A huge roundup in New Jersey this morning. And tonight, nearly 4 dozen people, including 3 city mayors and 2 state legislators, are under arrest. Charges here include bribery, money laundering, and no one has seen anything quite like this case. The story tonight from our Justice correspondent, Pete Williams.
Federal agents started the roundup at 6 a.m., arresting mayors and state legislators in New Jersey and rabbis in a parallel case in New York, 44 in all.
New Jersey's corruption problem is one of the worst, if not the worst, in the nation. Corruption is not only pervasive, it has become ingrained in New Jersey's political culture.
Hello, Mayor. 3 mayors were charged with taking bribes. Hoboken's Peter Camerano, Dennis Elwell of Secaucus, and Anthony Suarez of Ridgefield, along with Leona Beldini, the deputy mayor of Jersey City. FBI agent CTV, who broke the story, says federal agents made a surprising discovery.
The FBI says it also stumbled upon a Brooklyn man who was offering to broker the sale of human kidneys. They say for $160,000, he would find donors in Israel who needed the money and then fool U.S. hospitals that the donor and recipient were related. They say he'd been doing this for more than 10 years.
And prosecutors say rabbis at synagogues in New Jersey and New York helped the informant launder over $3 million by sending it to contacts in Israel who returned cash. The FBI says some New Jersey officials appeared suspicious of the informant, but never wary enough to pass up the cash. Pete Williams, NBC News at the Justice Department.
Word from the Pentagon tonight, 4 Americans have been killed in Afghanistan over just the past 24 hours. This month not even over, of course, but it's still already the deadliest month of the almost 8-year-long war. 35 U.S. service members killed so far in July. There are reports tonight the son of Osama bin Laden's been killed in Pakistan by a U.S. missile strike. 27-year-old Saad bin Laden. He is the 3rd eldest son among 17 children. He's the closest family member to Osama bin Laden to be eliminated by U.S. forces since 9/11. Osama, of course, remains at large. A good day on Wall Street here in New York today. The Dow was up 188 points, closing above the 9,000 mark for the first time since the month of January. CNBC's Maria Bartiromo is here to bring us up to speed on where things stand. Maria, long-established fact, there's the stock market and there's the U.S. economy. The two shouldn't be confused. But if you're telling me the market's in a good period right now, what does it mean?
Well, you know, you make a really good point, actually, Brian, because you are seeing a tale of 2 tapes, if you will. We've got such momentum in the stock market. In fact, this market is up 11% just in the last 9 trading days. Very, very strong. There's been improving sentiment about the economy as well as about the earnings picture. Now, today's catalyst was about the housing market. We saw existing home sales higher for the 3rd month in a row. We haven't seen a 3-month winning streak since 2004. On the earnings part of the picture, a little more murky. We have seen a lot of better than expected earnings coming out, but it's really the result of cost-cutting efforts. Companies really slimming down, even cutting jobs as opposed to real revenue growth and end demand. So we're waiting to see the story turn from cost-cutting story to one of revenue growth. Case in point, tonight, 3 major companies came out with earnings that were actually weaker than expected, and the stocks are down tonight. That may very well send a negative tone tomorrow morning. We'll see if this rally is snapped tomorrow. Brian, back to you.
CNBC's Maria Bartiromo at the NYSE for us tonight. Maria, thanks. Even if you watch your share of baseball games, you can live your whole life and not see one of these. A perfect game today for Mark Buehrle of the Chicago White Sox, defeating Tampa 5-0. 27 batters up, 27 down. There have only been 18 perfect games in the recorded history of the sport. This one, by the way, saved by a great catch at the wall in the 9th inning. He has him to thank. We're going to take a short break. When we continue, two big health and science stories, including a breakthrough in cloning and the sobering word out today on swine flu. Later on in the broadcast, if some of the kids returning to school this summer seem just a little bit ahead of the game, this might be why. A program that's making a difference. We're back. As we mentioned, two stories in the news tonight from the world of health and science. One of them has to do with a photo that caught our eye in the morning paper. Kids at a summer camp in Maine sporting the accessory of the season to guard against swine flu. We got an update on that today. NBC's Tom Costello standing by in our Washington newsroom with more on all of it tonight. Tom, first things first, swine flu update.
Yep, Brian, the FDA wants to get a vaccine in place as quickly as possible, fearing that this H1N1 virus may come back with a vengeance in the fall, along with the seasonal flu virus, so it's going to help rush the approval process. The FDA told Congress it must prepare for the worst, though it will watch for adverse effects from the vaccine. The government is hoping to have 160 million doses of the swine flu vaccine in place by October. It plans to soon start testing that vaccine on people.
And Tom, the other story out today had to do with cloning. Of course, questions immediately rise. What could it possibly have to do with humans?
Yeah, this is a big story because if they can clone a mouse by using skin cells, which is what they've done in China, they might one day be able to use human skin cells to grow human tissue without destroying an embryo. His name is Tiny, and what makes this Chinese mouse and 26 others unique is that this is likely to lead to new calls to ban any attempt to clone humans. It is a brave new world of bioethics, Brian.
That's right. Here we go. Tom Costello in our Washington newsroom tonight. Tom, thanks. When we come back, open for business, a new survey out of the best states in the country. Talked about the economy minutes ago. It is tough out there right now, but as promised, this is your chance to see if your state is on a new list of the states in the U.S. where businesses are right now surviving and some thriving. The story tonight from CNBC's Scott Cohn.
Our annual CNBC study ranks all 50 states in 10 categories, including the quality of their workforce, their infrastructure, the cost of doing business there. At number 5 this year, Utah. It wins points for its quality of life, but falls 2 places from last year on a wave of foreclosures. Climbing to number 4 is Iowa, which boasts the lowest cost of doing business in the nation. Number 3, Colorado, is fighting the slowdown by pushing green jobs, allowing companies like Bella Energy in the solar business to double its workforce.
We have a statewide initiative to require the utilities to use.
Part, says Governor Tim Kaine, keeping it going in an economic downturn.
We say education plus global connections is what's going to keep Virginia very strong going forward.
This year's study reflects only the earliest effects of the recession because the economy fell so far so fast. That means next year could bring even more changes and more competition in the war between the states for business. Scott Cohn, CNBC, Richmond, Virginia.
Earlier today, as a light rain fell on Midtown Manhattan, hundreds of people gathered in St. Bartholomew's Church to say a final goodbye to Walter Cronkite, the legendary CBS News anchorman who died last Friday night at the age of 92. It was a gathering of the news media universe, to be sure, but it was also a gathering of friends and admirers, people who had watched Walter, worked with him, sailed with him, even those who'd been to war with him. In the case of his old friend, the great Andy Rooney, Andy talked about meeting Walter in England during World War II, and then he just couldn't go any further.
I just feel so terrible about Walter's death that I can hardly say anything. He's been such a good friend over the years. Please excuse me. Thank you.
Walter's son, Chip Cronkite, also spoke today, said goodbye to his dad. Speaker after speaker called today a celebration of a great man, great American life, well lived. We're back with more news in a moment. Tonight, one educator's idea that's been making a difference in so many young lives.
Making a Difference. Brought to you by GlaxoSmithKline. Today's medicines, tomorrow's miracles.
Our Making a Difference report here tonight deals with something called Summer Slide, and it's not a ride at Six Flags. It's another term for the kind of brain drain that can happen to kids during the summer. It's particularly cruel to lower-income kids, and it adds to what's called the achievement gap between them and their middle-class peers. But every year, some very lucky public school kids across this country spend their summer days at a local private school as part of a program called Horizons. It's popular, it's growing, it's a favorite cause in our household, and it's making a difference nationally because it works. Our report tonight from NBC's Rahima Ellis.
Ready? Rahima Ellis, NBC News, Westport, Connecticut.
And that's our broadcast for this Thursday night. Thank you for being with us. I'm Brian Williams. We hope to see you right back here tomorrow evening. Good night.
Sunday, a Hillary Clinton exclusive. The Secretary of State on some of the world's most dangerous hotspots. If it's Sunday, it's